Every day, you and I get bombarded with negative news. And just like our bodies becomes what we eat, our minds become the information that we consume. If you want to stay positive, it's so important that you also listen to stories that inspires you and uplifts you. In this podcast, we interview world-leading experts dedicated to solving the world's most pressing problems. And if you stick around, I promise you will not only be as informed as if you watch the news, you will feel uplifted, inspired, and have more positive energy in your life. Welcome to Great.com Talks with. Hi and welcome. Today Great.com talks with Camilla Svensson, who is a political advisor specialized into the work of climate capture in the organization CIRO.no. And if you haven't heard of them, they are a Norwegian organization, and CIRO stands for Zero Emission Resource Organization. And they are fighting for emissionless technologies and carbon capture. And I'm real excited to speak with Camilla today. And if you're new here and to this podcast, you definitely want to subscribe, because in this podcast, we talk about all kinds of things we can do to make the environment better on this planet. Camilla, hi and welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Good to have you here. Now, how would you describe CIRO to someone that might not be so familiar with the organization, or what the carbon situation is like in Norway?
So CIRO is an environmental organization and non-governmental organization. And we're quite young in Norwegian contexts. We're around 20 years old as an organization. And we mainly work in Norway, but climate issues has no borders. So what we do in Norway has a great effect also internationally. And our organization work only with climate issues. So that means that we work to replace technologies or use more technologies that will mitigate emissions that are the reasons for climate change. So we work with renewable energy, transition to renewable transport, and myself work with carbon capture and storage and industry-related emissions.
Interesting. And now, for someone that might not be so familiar with what's going on in Norway, what is the progression that is happening in Norway right now? Because I know Norway is a country that got parts of its economy from their oil industry, and now I guess you're making some kind of transition. Where is Norway in that timeline?
We're very dependent on oil and gas still, but we export that kind of emissions in a way, so the emissions are not related to our emissions here that much, and we're lucky because we have hydro as our energy source in Norway. 90% of our energy usage is from hydro. So in that way, we're lucky. And the latest, 20, 30 years, we've slowly been using renewable energy in a greater content. Like wind is growing a bit, solar as well, but not growing and being implemented in as much as it should be, of course. And so that's important that we get the speed up, the transition to more renewable energy usage. But we have one field which is we know we are way ahead, and that's in electrical cars. We're maybe the country in the world who has most electrical cars. So that's good. And it's many reasons for that. It's a huge package of political means that has brought us to that. And the main reason is that it's a great advantage to own an electrical car in Norway.
Hmm. That's real good. Being powered by hydro energy and then a lot of electric cars. And to paint this picture even more, for someone that might not be so familiar with carbon capture, where is this technology at today? How competitive is it to something like planting trees or other methods that people might have first in mind when it comes to carbon capture?
Mm-hmm. Well, it can be very effective if we use it on great, big emission sources like industry and also waste management plants. And the good news is that there aren't that many point sources of emissions when it comes to industry. For example, when it comes to cars, you have lots and lots and lots of cars. But for industry, it is not that many sources. So what's good with carbon capture and storage is that it's a mature technology. It is in use worldwide, especially in USA and Canada. It's been proven, and it can actually mitigate emissions to a great extent. What's important now is to lower the cost because it's quite expensive to use. But for Norway, we've come a long way in this carbon capture and storage issue because the government has proposed that we are going to build a full-scale carbon capture and storage infrastructure here in Norway. And the first project that will be part of that is Norcem, which is a cement factory. And they're gonna get rid of all their CO2 emissions because of this project. And if other cement factories, for example, follow in their lead, globally, the cement industry mitigates 5% of the world's CO2 emissions. So if they can use this technology, it will mean a great deal.
So how does this technology work then? Because me not knowing so much about it, I imagine a big chimney, and in the chimney there is like a filter or a chemical, or how is it working?
Yeah, it's a chemical.
Yeah.
It's something called amines mainly, which you can put this chemical into the fluid gas that comes in the chimney, and the chemicals will connect to CO2 only and not the rest of the exhaust. And since it connects to CO2, it will make it heavier and it drops down, and you can collect the CO2 and separate it from the rest. And when you pressure CO2, it gets liquid. So you have it in a liquid form, and you can transport it on trailers or ships and inject it into the underground, either offshore or onshore, which sounds strange, but carbon is something coming up from the earth already. So you can say that you bring it back where it came from.
So it's not like a nuclear waste thing. It's more that, okay, oil is already in the ground. We are turning the carbon emissions kind of back into oil, but not really.
Not really. Into the ground and way 1 kilometer down or more into reservoirs, which can be natural or can be depleted gas or oil reservoirs. And since the CO2 is in liquid form, and where you emit it, where you put it, it's kind of like a swamp. It's sandstone with small holes that takes up the CO2 into the ground where it stays. So that's the main idea behind this.
And there's no risk it will like leak back to the surface? And
it's very strict where you put it. It's very strict when the chosen areas, and also it's been what do you call that, monitored. So it's heavily restricted, so it will not leak. If something is detected, it will be stopped. And since we have these trapping mechanisms like sandstone and it being so long down, there's very little risk for that happening. And it's not the same as waste anyway, because it's natural to think that CO2 is dangerous because it's the main problem, the main cause of climate change. But that's because it's too much of it in the atmosphere. It's not dangerous in itself, it's a natural component in the nature. So the thing is to keep it out of the atmosphere.
Right. And what kind of challenges are in the way to make this technology really scale up? It would be wonderful to see every chimney in the world has this gas in it.
Yes.
And block the emissions.
Agreed. It's mainly political will, I would say, because you have to, in the beginning, it needs state support. So it has to be prioritized in budgets. And then you have to find some kind of business model or framework that could make carbon capture and storage live on its own, be something you could do without state support. And this can be taxes, it can be funds, it can be like we did with electrical cars in Norway. We have all these measures making it financially viable to choose. So if the industry got some kind of incentives to do CCS, I think it will really scale up. Like if the cement industry knew that the state would prefer their cement in official buildings, roads, bridges, if they would be more competitive with their cement because it's climate-friendly cement, they could invest in it.
That would be really exciting if that transition could be made. So what is CIRO's role in this transition then? Like, where do you look to leverage and have influence and create this transition?
Yeah, so we're only 25 people, but we work kind of a combination with technology and expertise in that, and political expertise. So we're kind of in the middle of or translating even academic language, technical language towards politicians and vice versa. So we do a lot of political work, lobby work, for example, pressuring in every way that this kind of climate measures should be prioritized in state budget, in laws, in rules. So kind of normal political work that any environmental organization do.
Right. And how are you received? Is it with a lot of opposition, or do you feel generally people kind of want to make these changes as long as the economic circumstances are correct?
Yeah, I think we're listened to, and in Norway it is easier maybe than in many countries to work with environmental issues because it's seen as needed and as something positive. And also CIRO, our organization, is viewed upon as very constructive and pragmatic. So it's easy to to influence in a way. But we're never satisfied, of course. We always want something more, or bigger goals to be set. And Norway we have this double take on things, because we're so dependent on oil and gas, which we export, and which is a big environmental problem.
Right. And talking about bigger goals then, what does CIRO hope to accomplish in, let's say, the next 10 years? What does the future look like?
We said that in the latest governmental declarations, it should be that we at least follow EU's climate goals, which is reduction by 55 by 2050, which is the least that we should do here in Norway with our own emissions. And then we should contribute to lower the emissions even more than 55% worldwide by using our oil fund, for example, to invest in renewable energy infrastructure globally, etc. So we should take care of our own emissions as well as contributing worldwide.
I read that Norway is doing a big job with helping other countries lower their emission. I read you invest in Rainforest Protection. Was it in Brazil?
Yes, that's true.
Yeah.
It's a part of our budget. And also we invest in solar projects and wind projects worldwide, etc.
I hear the economic mindset behind everything, and I think that's a good and smart way to accomplish change. So now imagine that someone is listening to this, and I can imagine they feel trust towards your organization and your ability to influence in a positive way. What can they do as an individual to somehow be part of this change that is happening?
Oh, we can do so many things as individuals. It's in every way we choose our actions in daily life and in a broader context as well. Where you live, how you transport yourself or not transport yourself, the food you eat, all these things. But I have to say that we have individual choices, but in addition to that, it must be possible to make these choices. So it's part of a bigger structure that we have to contribute to together. So the way we organize our cities, for example, is very important. And during these times, we know that we don't have to travel that much. We can actually meet by internet and save the mitigation from planes, for example. But I think it's important to just be conscious on what you do every step of your day and every part of your life. But as well, that the politicians and the business makes this possible and doable for everyone. So it goes together.
Yeah, definitely goes together. And what can someone do to keep up to date with the work of CIRO?
You can look at our website, of course, CIRO.no. And these days we have a conference which normally should be finished within a few days, but we have to extend it. So it's lots of information on our website on CIRO conference as well. So that's the main two things.
Beautiful. Camilla Svensson, thank you so much for taking the time to speak with Great.com today about carbon capture and climate change.
Thank you.
Thank you. And for you listening, if you enjoyed this and if you would like for more people to hear discussions about climate change, please press subscribe in your podcast app or on YouTube. That will help us get through the algorithms so more people can hear this kind of conversations. Thank you so much for listening, and we see you in the next episode.